A customer brought a brand new rifle back to me 3 days after he bought it. Furious, convinced we'd sold him a lemon. Said he couldn't hit a barn door at 100 yards. Turned out he'd sighted it in himself the night before opening day. One shot at 25 yards off a car hood. No rest. Cranked the turrets based on that single hole and called it done. The rifle was fine. The process was the problem. I see this every single season. Hunters spend $800, $1,000, sometimes $2,000 on a rifle and a scope, then sight it in with a method they picked up from a buddy or a forum post 15 years ago, and it costs them a shot on the animal they waited all year for. Here's the thing nobody selling you ammo wants to say. Most of the quick and easy sighting methods people swear by aren't actually saving you time. They're just moving the wasted time from the bench to the field, where it costs you a lot more than a box of ammo. It costs you the shot. So today we're doing this one a little different than usual. I'm ranking the actual methods people use to sight in a rifle, worst to best, against one filter I'll lay out in a second. 6 methods total, from the ones that get people hurt or embarrassed in the field, up to the one I use on every rifle that comes across my bench. And the best method on this list isn't the one with the fancy laser gadget everyone's been buying the last few years. It's slower than you want it to be, and that's exactly why it works. Don't skip to the end, because the middle of this list is where most of you are making your mistake right now, not the bottom. I'm Andrew. I've run the range and the gunsmithing bench at a rifle shop for going on 15 years, and I've sighted in more rifles than I can honestly count at this point. Customers' guns, my own. Guns for guys headed to Africa on a once-in-a-lifetime trip, and guys headed to the back 40 behind their house. I've mounted the scopes, I've torqued the rings. I've watched people do this right, and watched people do it very, very wrong. I've seen every shortcut in the book, and I've seen exactly what each one costs people, usually at the worst possible moment. Here's the filter, and it never moves the whole way through this list. Does this method get you a rifle that's actually zeroed, meaning it repeats, shot after shot, cold barrel to hot barrel, this range trip to the next one? And does it teach you anything real about your rifle and your own shooting along the way? Repeatable and educational. That's it. 2 questions. Anything that skips either one is a shortcut that bites you later, usually when you can least afford it. Let's rank them, worst to first. Number 6, the worst on the list, the single-shot bench zero. This is what that customer did to himself, and it is by far the most common mistake I see walk back through my door in October. One shot, no confirmation, adjust the turrets, walk away feeling good about yourself. The problem against the filter is obvious once you say it out loud. One shot tells you almost nothing. It could be a called flyer, a gust of wind you didn't account for, an inconsistent rest, or just where that one particular round happened to land that particular time. You have zero idea if it's repeatable, because you never asked the rifle to repeat anything. I've seen guys zero a rifle in one shot at the bench, walk away feeling like a marksman, then group 3 inches off that same point an hour later, and blame the ammo, blame the scope, blame the rifle. It's not the ammo, it's not the scope, it's the method. This one costs you almost nothing in time, and that's exactly what it's worth. Nothing. Skip it entirely. Number 5. Sighting in without ever cleaning or checking the bore first. This one doesn't get talked about enough, and it belongs near the bottom of this list because of how quietly it wrecks people's confidence. A new rifle almost always ships with some amount of factory grease or oil still down the bore from the manufacturing process, and sometimes a little bit of debris from shipping and handling. If you skip a bore check and a quick clean before your very first shots, that first group can be scattered for reasons that have nothing to do with you, your rifle's actual accuracy, or your scope. Guys sight in on a dirty bore, get a mediocre group, and conclude the rifle just isn't that accurate, when really the barrel hadn't even settled into its actual performance yet. Against the filter, this fails on the educational side. You think you've learned something true about your rifle, and you haven't learned anything at all, because the conditions weren't real. Quick fix. Run a few patches through before you ever load a live round. Number 4. Sighting in from a bipod or sandbag with no follow-through check on a hot barrel. This is a step up from a single shot, and I want to be fair to it, because at least people are usually shooting an actual group here. 3 to 5 rounds instead of 1. But this is where I see the second most common mistake in the whole process. People zero dead cold, straight out of the case, first shots of the day, get a nice tight group, and then never check the rifle again once it's warmed up, or after they've fired a longer string. A barrel's point of impact can shift as it heats up, especially on thinner sporter-weight hunting barrels, the kind most of us actually carry in the woods. I've had customers swear up and down their rifle was perfectly zeroed at the range, then miss clean in the field on their second or third shot of the day because the barrel had warmed and walked. Against the filter, this one is repeatable in theory, but completely untested in practice. You've confirmed a zero for exactly one condition, cold and fresh off the rack, and hunting simply doesn't always happen that way. Good start. Incomplete finish. Don't stop here. Number 3. Bore sighting with a laser, then heading straight to paper without ever grouping properly. Laser bore sighters are genuinely useful, and I want to be clear, I actually recommend them. They're excellent for getting a rifle roughly on paper fast, so you're not wasting a full box of ammo just walking shots onto the target from 3 feet off the page. That part of the process is smart, and it saves you money. Where people go wrong is trusting the laser as the final answer, instead of what it actually is, which is the starting point. A bore sighter gets you close. It does not, and cannot, account for how your specific rifle, your specific ammo, and your specific eye behind that specific scope actually group together downrange in real conditions. Against the filter, this one fails on repeatability the moment it's treated as the finish line instead of step 1. As a shortcut to save ammo before the real work begins, it's excellent, and I use one myself on every rifle I mount a new scope to. As the entire process from start to finish, it's a trap that a lot of first-time scope owners fall straight into. Number 2. The standard 3-shot group at distance. Done right, but only ever done once. Now we're getting into legitimate methods, and I want to say clearly, this one isn't wrong, it's just incomplete, and that incompleteness is exactly where it loses to the method above it. Set up at your actual hunting zero distance, shoot a clean 3-shot group from a real rest, adjust your turrets to the group's center rather than any single hole, and call it good. Most of the actual instruction you'll find online stops right here, and for a huge percentage of shooters, that's genuinely good enough. Here's the flaw against our filter though. You've confirmed the rifle shoots to point of aim exactly once, under exactly one set of conditions, on exactly one day. You haven't confirmed it repeats. Ammo lots vary slightly. Temperature affects powder burn rate more than people realize. Scope mounts can settle slightly after that first real recoil impulse. This method is right 90% of the time, and dead wrong the other 10%, and you have no way of knowing which 10% you landed in until the day it matters. Number 1. The best method on this entire list. The cold bore. Confirm and repeat 0. Here's the method, and here's the rule it breaks. Everybody wants sighting in to take 10-15 minutes. Box checked, back in the truck. This one doesn't, and that's exactly why it's correct. Set up at your actual zero distance. For the overwhelming majority of hunting rifles that means 100 yards. Full stop. Not 25 yards as a shortcut that somebody told you scales up fine. Because it doesn't always. Let the barrel go completely cold between every single string. The same way it will be cold on that first real shot at an animal in the field. Because a cold bore and a hot bore do not always shoot to precisely the same point of impact. And that difference is exactly what ends hunts. Fire 3 shots, not 1, from a genuinely solid rest. Real bags or a proper front and rear rest, not your knee, not a rolled-up jacket. not a truck hood. Look at where the group actually centers as a whole, not where any single impressive shot landed. Adjust your turrets based on that group center. Then here's the step almost nobody does. Let the barrel cool all the way back down again. Completely, no shortcuts, however long that takes. Fire a second 3-shot group to confirm the adjustment actually held under the same cold bore conditions as a real hunt. If that second group repeats and centers where you expect, you are done, and you can trust that zero completely. If it doesn't repeat, you find out right now, on the bench, with time and ammo to fix it, instead of finding out never, because the guy who skips this confirmation step doesn't discover his rifle isn't actually zeroed until he's already squeezed the trigger on something that mattered. Against the filter, this is the only method on the entire list that satisfies both questions completely. It's fully repeatable, because you've proven it twice under realistic conditions, instead of assuming it once. And it's genuinely educational, because you walk away actually knowing your rifle's real cold-bore group size, how it behaves as it heats up, and how much you personally can trust that first shot of the day, which is the only shot that actually counts when you're hunting. Let me give you a real example, because I think it makes this land better than just talking theory. 2 seasons back, I had a customer, long-time hunter, good shooter, sighted his .30-06 in exactly the way I described in Method 2. Solid 3-shot group at 100 yards, adjusted, walked away happy. Came back to me in November telling me the rifle was off, and he'd missed a clean broadside shot on a good buck at 110 yards. No wind, no excuse. We ran the cold bore confirmation together right there at my range. First cold shot landed nearly 2 inches off from where his warm groups had been sitting all along. Same rifle, same ammo lot, same scope. The only variable was barrel temperature on that very first shot of the day, which is exactly the shot he took in the field. That 2 inches was the entire difference between a clean pass-through and the miss he walked away with. He wasn't a bad shot. His method just never asked the rifle the one question that actually mattered. A few quick things that trip people up inside, even the right method, because I want this to actually be useful and not just a ranking. First, your rest matters more than people think. A rifle resting directly on a hard sandbag versus resting on a soft bipod versus free recoiling off a leather rear bag can genuinely shift point of impact slightly, especially on lighter sporter rifles. Sight in using the same style of rest you'll actually be shooting from in the field, as close as you reasonably can. Second, use the actual ammo you intend to hunt with, not the cheapest bulk ammo on the shelf that happens to be the same caliber. Different bullet weights and different powder charges from different manufacturers can shift your zero noticeably, sometimes an inch or more at 100 yards. Sight in with the box you're actually going to load into the field. Third, torque your scope rings and base screws to spec before you ever fire the first shot, and check them again after your first real range session. A scope that shifts slightly under recoil because a ring screw was snug instead of properly torqued will mimic every single symptom of a bad sighting-in job, and it'll send you chasing a problem that was never really about your method at all. Here's the honest truth before we close out today. None of this matters if you only do it once a year, the week before season, and never again. The hunters I trust most, the ones who consistently make clean, ethical shots, confirm their zero every single season without fail. Not because the scope necessarily moved, but because mounts loosen slightly over time. Ammo lots change from one production run to the next, and honestly, your own consistency behind the trigger drifts a little too if you haven't shot all summer. A perfect zero from 3 years ago isn't a zero anymore. It's a guess, with good intentions behind it. Your turn. What's the worst sighting-in story you've got? Yours or a buddy's? I want to hear it. Drop it below, and tell me if you run the cold bore confirmation, or if this is the first time you're hearing it laid out this way. Next time we're doing this same worst to best breakdown on scope mounting itself, because if I'm honest, half the bad zero complaints that walk through my door aren't actually a sighting in problem at all. They're a scope that was never mounted right to begin with, and that's a whole different conversation. See you there. Shoot straight.